I mean, you're drafted out of ODU in 96. You played for about a decade. You've been pretty much coaching ever since. I imagine this might be the first May, June, April that you've spent at home since when? I mean, maybe before your college career? I mean, how far back do we go here?
So I think 1993, because after my freshman year at Old Dominion, I played in a summer league in my area back in New York, and for a team that was called the Schenectady Mohawks at the time, and I stayed at home with my parents at that time. So yeah, then 94, 95, I went to Cape Cod, and 96, I got drafted. So yeah, it's 27 years.
And I imagine that summer at home and playing for Schenectady a little bit different than having a wife and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, huh?
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah, you could say that. We really have been very lucky during this because we just moved to Florida in the fall, and the weather's been perfect. The kids have been able to swim, and so we keep them active. Talking to my family back in New York, the weather has just been horrible, and they've been cooped up and making things a lot worse. So I feel very fortunate that we did move when we did.
Now, we obviously are familiar with you in your role with the Rays as the bench coach, but you've got some other guys with some deep 757 ties. Obviously, Ryan Yarborough, another former ODU Monarch, and also Brandon Lau, one of our own from here in Suffolk. Coach, what's it like having two guys from around here? And second part of that question, shouldn't the Rays kind of be our 757 adopted team with all the local ties?
Sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, I think you're probably going to get more Orioles fans with the tides and everything. But yeah, no, that's really cool. For me, I'm very proud of the fact that Yarbs is on the team, and it's cool to see ODU alum make it to the big leagues whenever that does happen. The baseball program there has such a storied history and had so many great players, but not a ton of guys that made it to the big leagues. It's really cool to see Yarbs do it. Brandon Lau has just really burst onto the scene as a guy that really wasn't a high pick. It wasn't really somebody that was destined to make it, but has just really worked so hard and become a great player all around. And I like to talk to him because we have some common connections, people he knew from Suffolk, people that I coached or knew, when he obviously I'm a lot older than him, but some names that we can converse about. So he's just a real easy guy to talk to. So that is fun for me to kind of work that web of connection back to the 757.
Absolutely, and we are certainly claiming it. We're taking pride in it. Want to talk to you about when, and we're all hoping and praying that we do see some Major League Baseball here in 2020. It looks like almost a guarantee that at least early on, when the games will be played, they'll be played in empty stadiums. We've talked to some players about what that dynamic's going to be like. I'm wondering for you, a guy who obviously has to communicate with 24, 25 guys in the dugout, but also the umpires. What's that dynamic going to be like for you in a totally empty stadium with the games likely on television?
Well, there's so many things that you've heard, the possibility of having to sit in the stands to keep a certain amount of distance, because obviously there's no way to be in a dugout and keep 6 feet of space between everybody. So there's so many questions that are still out there, but the communicating with the players will obviously be easy. There won't be any crowd noise to fight with or anything like that. And, I think our team, Kevin Cash as the manager, he's not a guy that argues with the umpires. And that just kind of sets the tone for the whole team. I mean, there'll be occasional chirping here and there. Obviously, it's just part of the game, but we are definitely not a team that argues every ball and strike or gets on umpires very much. So that part of it, I think we'll be in pretty good shape when it comes to that. It will be interesting to see. That's a great question. I hadn't thought about that, how other teams will handle that, because some people, that's just part of their game, and it's been that way forever. And we'll see if people have to adapt. all of us have played and coached at different levels of baseball with very few fans, and I go back to thinking about the Arizona Fall League where I was managing, and there were, dozens of people at those games and no crowd noise. So you could hear everything, every pitch. And, it'll just bring back some of those memories.
You've got an interesting perspective, I would imagine, on baseball and it being readily available. I mean, you've been a lifer. I mean, you talked about, growing up and playing summer ball. And obviously we know starting at ODU in the mid 90s, and you've been in the game ever since. For the first time in a lot of people's lives, it's been taken away. We obviously went through the strike years, but this feels a little bit different. Even you, a guy who's been a baseball lifer, does this maybe, remind you of the appreciation of this great game and how readily available it is to so many people?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting way to think about it because, like you mentioned, I've been home with my kids, and that's been a great spin-off of this, time that I would never otherwise have with them, and my wife as well, which presents different challenges. But at the same time, you're thinking, man, I really have to take advantage of this. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that I still have a job and I'm still getting paid, albeit at a lesser rate, but still, I mean, there's people in a lot worse situations. So I thank God for that every day that we're in a situation where we can still manage. But as far as increasing my love for the game, absolutely, and also making me realize that when my time in the game is done, I really need to be thoughtful about what I'm going to do so that I'm not in this place where I'm just sitting around lost and mumbling to myself. I need to have some activities planned, and my wife and I have to have some things that we can do that keep our minds sharp.
Two more for you. How have you gone about communicating with the guys? And I'm not going to ask you to get into all of the team or franchise secrets, but it feels like we are close to getting back to a spring training part 2 as your role as the bench coach. What have your kind of duties and tasks been like in terms of keeping up with the guys like Yarbs and like Brandon?
So, our organizational philosophy prior to this and during this has always been care for the people, care for the families. And we made it very clear early on. The message came from our ownership, our general manager, our manager. We don't care at all about whether you are pushing yourself physically, risking anything to stay in shape. This is all about your health, your family's health, the health of the community. So take care of your families. And all we've been trying to do is stay out of their way, but still let them know that they're cared for. So we've broken up the team into different groups, and certain people are responsible for communicating with other different groups. And then myself and the manager, we kind of hit everybody through calls and texts, and just try to see if everybody's okay. And fortunately, so far, no one has tested positive. No family members, of our immediate group have been impacted. So that's been the best blessing so far. And all we really try to do is let them know that we're here if they need something. Our trainers keep in touch with them. We decided to err on the side of being over communicative rather than under, and just giving them as much information as we have, but really there hasn't been much so far. So hopefully this week we'll start to hear more.
My final question for you, and we chatted a little bit about this when you were here in Norfolk. It seems like whenever there is a managerial opening, your name is associated with it. And I would imagine that is a compliment to you and something that is obviously enjoyable. How do you view that? You've interviewed for several jobs. Is it a distraction to have dorks like me keep asking you about it? Or is it maybe a flattering process because you are close to being a big league manager, something that I imagine is a goal of yours?
Well, it's absolutely flattering, and to get the opportunity to go through that process for the first couple times this year was very eye-opening, and it really, there were some, I went on two different ends of the spectrum, a West Coast team, an East Coast team. And to me, it was a real information gathering process. I didn't expect to get down to the last couple of people of either of those, being my first time. But what it really comes down to is that I work in a really good organization, and I'm challenged and pushed by a lot of really good people. And because of that, it prepared me for the process, and I think that preparation started without me knowing it years and years ago, being with Pat McMahon and Tim Parrington and Tony Guzzo and those guys at Old Dominion. I started learning from some great baseball people, and those lessons stick with you, and throughout my time in the minor leagues here in Tampa, and then my time with the Indians, all of those things, they form who you are as a person. And that helped me tremendously in the interview process without me knowing that it was going to help. So if I continue to get those opportunities, I would welcome them. But at the same time, the way I've kind of approached my career is I'm never working at a job for the next job. I'm doing the best I can. And if I get opportunities, then I cross that bridge when I get there. And so far that's served me well. And that's how I see myself continuing to go.